Hello, race fans, and welcome to Above the Yellow Line. My name is Taylor, and this is the podcast where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Today, as you guessed it, we will be recapping the Great American Race, the 63rd running of the Daytona 500. Before we have the chaos of the Daytona 500, I did watch the truck race on Friday. Congrats to Ben Rhodes, who won that with a super close finish. I also watched the entirety of the Xfinity Race, which, gosh, they always have such exciting races in that series with up-and-coming names. And Austin Cindric, who was also racing in the Daytona 500, won that one in dominating fashion. He led almost the entire race, which is something we don't see a lot at super speedways, with cars leading the entire race pretty much and finishing first. So congrats to Austin Cindric. I love watching the Xfinity races and the truck races with the up-and-coming names, trying to make an image for themselves. So congrats to those drivers, Ben Rhodes and Austin Cindric, for winning those races. But with those races on Friday and Saturday, we move straight into the Daytona 500, and I'm going to take you through the track and the history. The track is a 2.5-mile super speedway track. The race is 200 laps and a 500-mile race. Denny Hamlin has won the past two Daytona 500s in 2019 and 2020, trying to make it a third consecutive win in the Daytona 500 this year. That would make it the first in NASCAR history. The first official Daytona 500 winner was Lee Petty in 1959. And the average time for the Daytona 500 is 3 hours and 38 minutes. So I settled in for a long race, setting up my snacks, kicking up my feet, and I got ready for a whole bunch of chaos, excitement, and potential heartbreak, some of which we got and some of which we did not. Now, the Daytona 500 is like my Super Bowl, and same with the championship race at the end of the year. So I wore my Earnhardt shirt for the special occasion, especially because this was the 20th Daytona 500 since he tragically passed away during the race. There was a great salute to him during the third lap of this race. I also watched the pre-race ceremonies. It was about 3 hours of footage from Fox. They did an excellent job with that. Probably the best I've seen since watching the Daytona 500 5 or 6 years in a row now. So they did a great job with it. They always do, but this one was especially fantastic. So with pre-race ceremonies out of the way, now we have to line up the field. We have to start by talking about the cars that unfortunately have to move to the rear of the field due to unapproved changes to the car or because they had to go to backups based on the wreckage in the duels. So we're going to start with the 2 of Brad Keselowski, the 16 of Kaz Grala, the 19, a new addition to the list from the podcast last time, for a radiator and oil change. And unfortunately, the 23 of Bubba Wallace failed pre-race inspection 3 times, and he was sent to the rear of the field, and his crew chief was ejected. Other drivers involved in this were the 24 of William Byron, the 38 of Anthony Alfredo, the 41 of Cole Custer, 42 of Ross Chastain, and finally, a new addition to the list, the 43 of Eric Jones, for an engine change. And I'm not sure if this is the most cars in Daytona 500 history to move to the rear of the field, but this is the most I think I've seen in the years I've been watching this race. So I was surprised to see the pileup on this list, bearing in mind that I know the clashes and the duels are pretty violent at some points, but nevertheless I was shocked to see all these cars moving to the rear of the field. With those moves to the rear of the field, the lineup did change. However, the lineup I'm going to show you right now did not. This is how the cars placed during qualifying, the duels, and the clash before the changes to the cars and before the cars got totaled. So this is your lineup. Alex Bowman will lead them into turn 1. After we thought he was going to go to the rear of the field because his engine was having some issues, but apparently he was able to get a lap or two on the track during practice and figured the car was fine. So Alex Bowman led your field to the green flag. Let's start with stage 1 of this race. The cars crossed the start-finish line, and on lap 3, we had an amazing tribute to Dale Earnhardt Sr., which was very, very short because at the end of that lap, literally as the cars were crossing the line, Derek Cope ended up crashing his car. I believe a tire went down. And it was at this point I figured this was going to be a very, very long race. Now what's cool about this lap at least was Derek Cope was the only one in the field, I believe, to have raced with Dale Earnhardt Sr. during the 2001 tragic race. And Kevin Harvick did lead this lap, which Kevin Harvick filled in for Dale Earnhardt Sr. after he passed away. So even though the tribute ended early, there was some nice touches in there with Kevin Harvick leading and Derek Cope being in the race as well. So we went back to green on lap 8. Kevin Harvick led, and something else that was great to see was Ryan Newman led for a lap or two, and it was great to see him lead because last year he also had a very scary wreck at Daytona. It makes me super sick feeling watching it, but we are so glad that he is okay, and it was awesome to see him at the front of the field. And that didn't last long. It didn't, unfortunately, because at lap 14, we already had the big one. Lap 14 was the mark of the absolute disappointment of this race for me. And it also started a red flag, which then turned into a rain delay, which lasted about 5 hours and 40 minutes, which, like I said, I knew I was in for a long race. I did not realize that the rain delay was going to end around 9 o'clock, and then we would be racing until 12:30 at night. But back to this wreck, I'll show you what happened here. Christopher Bell seemed to cause this wreck. He was getting a big push from behind by Kyle Busch, and then that push turned into Bell pushing Almirola, and he just got to the back of Almirola's bumper, turned right slightly, and ended up turning Almirola into the cars and beside him, Alex Bowman being one of them. So this was a massive wreck, 16-car pileup. I'll show you the list of the drivers who were all involved here. A lot of them did not finish this race, or they tried to with the repair clock but weren't able to repair their cars in time. So these were the cars that were involved, and there goes all my picks. Jones was out of the race at this point. I thought that Blaney had a good shot at winning this race as well. He was out of the race. We had big hitters still in the race like Denny Hamlin. We had Michael McDowell, who I said had the best average finish statistically at this track, still in the race. We had also big names like Chase Elliott. So it wasn't over, but the lack of cars in the rest of the race did cause the race to be a little stale. And we'll talk about that near the end of the podcast here. But we had a rain delay, obviously, like I talked about, that lasted 5 hours, 40 minutes, and 29 seconds. And oh my gosh, I kind of reflected on lap 14 and what I learned here. And what I learned is that I think Daytona needs to look at turf or pavement in the infield and not a whole bunch of grass. And here is why. Now, I know the grass does slow the cars down if they get into a wreck, but speaking of Blaney's car, that he was out of the race thinking he could win, he made it through that wreck. He just hit the grass really hard, and the grass totally ruined his car. So for that reason, I'm like, maybe it's time to look at some turf, and especially because the grass makes the track really dirty and then there's a cleanup involved. I also learned that experience at this track is key if you are leading the race. Obviously, Christopher Bell was a rookie last year. Now he's in a big-time ride, and I've expressed my concerns about this, and I thought he was getting better, and the concerns just rose back up again. If you're going to lead the race and make a rookie mistake like that, pushing into the back of the car this early in the race, it's just not ideal. And I know a lot of the drivers were mad. I'll put some comments from the drivers up here. Eric Almirola, obviously pretty frustrated. David Reagan frustrated. And Eric Jones making a comment, clearly frustrated. I know if he was in that ride, I don't know if he would have done the same thing that Bell did, but I don't think we would have had this wreck. So all the drivers pretty frustrated. I also learned during this time is that the Daytona 500 should probably have an earlier start time. Prime rain time in Florida is like 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we start the race at 2:30. That just doesn't sound smart to me, and we've dealt with rain delays in the Daytona 500 for the past few years consistently, and that just causes for momentum to die down for the fans and a late start time, and we're up till 12 o'clock at night. So I think NASCAR needs to start looking at early start times. I know it's a little painful for the West Coast, but I honestly think everyone involved in watching this race would rather have an early start time, wake up a little bit early, rather than staying up past our bedtimes and waiting it out. So those are the few things that I learned during the lap 14 crash, and we did not go back racing until 9 p.m. at night after this really, really long rain delay, and we did not end the race until like 12:30. But we waved the green flag again at 9 o'clock at night, and a lot of the cars under the caution. We had to have a few caution laps to make sure the track was completely dry, but a lot of the cars were trying to get some fixes in. Reddick's car, my God, I'll show you the image, but I don't understand how he was able to race that thing. Clearly a mess, and a lot of the drivers ended up running out of time to fix their cars. And the reason that there is a clock to fix the cars is because NASCAR doesn't want unsafe cars on the track, which, ironic, we'll get to in a second. But they don't want drivers and crews to spend too much time working on the cars, one, because then you go laps down and it doesn't make sense. They also don't want the possibility of you trying to race the clock, getting on the track, having debris fall, and then potentially ruining another car, which ended up happening on around lap 35, 38. Lap 35, William Byron was black flagged because the bumper of his car was falling off, and on lap 38 there was a caution for Briscoe and Health because that debris ended up popping their tires, and I don't understand why NASCAR didn't pull a caution when they saw the debris fall off. They just let the race run, so that was also something weird that I saw. So those two cars were out on lap 43. We restarted. Denny Hamlin ended up taking the lead with about 1 to go in stage 1. Everyone tried to make a move, and almost every car ended up moving to the inside line. And then everyone's like, well, crap, everyone moved to the inside. I got to move to the outside. And then it got really scary. With all that shaking out, Denny Hamlin was your stage 1 winner. Now the start of stage 2, the restart order was Hamlin, Bell, Dillon, Cindric, Larson, Logano, and Kyle Busch as your top cars in this. And then the drivers ended up being single file. Bell ended up leading a little bit. Of course, Hamlin led a little bit. Cindric led a little bit as well. And at the halfway point, the drivers started to move out of single file. And at that point as well, Fox had a commercial. And here's another gripe I had with this race. Fox pulled, they had an amazing pre-race show, but they pulled the worst commercials. I don't think they had anything, the commentators had anything to do with the commercial break times. But holy crap, there was cautions during commercials, like wrecks happening during commercials that we weren't able to see. And the only reason I knew is because of the people at the track tweeting it. And I was like, why are we missing this? I don't know. I was really, really frustrated. At the halfway point, there was a lot of movement happening, and they totally disregarded the movement after having single file racing for like 5 minutes. So after the single file racing, lap 104, we had pit stops. The Fords came in. We had some single car pit stops. Not sure why that happened. We had Chevys pitting at lap 109, and smack in between there, we had the Toyotas pit by themselves, which I mentioned last podcast I was really hoping would not happen because the Toyotas had nobody to draft with. But it was interesting that they decided to be by themselves, which would end up biting them in the butt a little bit later in the race, costing Hamlin the lead. Like I said, there were poorly timed cautions on lap 112. During the commercial, there was a pretty big wreck, and this was another crash that was seemingly caused by Christopher Bell. He had a tire go down, and that ended up spinning out and causing a lot of other cars to get in with each other. It involved Stenhouse as well, Larson, Jamie McMurray, LaJoie, and Kaz Gralla. On this caution, some of the drivers came to pit road to get some tires, get some fuel, as a part of some of their strategy. So we restarted with 12 to go in the stage. And we restarted even though Kaz Gralla's tire was on fire. They didn't pull up another caution, or they didn't even care. We just restarted with 12 to go. Hamlin and Wallace were on the front row, and I felt like they were actually afraid to race each other because both were going for pretty big history-making things here. Bubba Wallace was trying to get his first win, race for his first win in the car, race for some stage points, getting on the lead lap, being the leader of the Daytona 500 in his new car, new team. Lots of pressure there. And Hamlin was trying to make it a three-peat of 3 wins in the Daytona 500. So, no wonder they were afraid to race each other here. I'm just nervous that they're going to be afraid to race each other for the remainder of the season. And I hope that's not the case. I know Hamlin radioed over to Bubba Wallace saying that he can trust him if they work together. Meaning, if they're not working together, can they not be trusted? Anyway, there was a lot of just some weird stuff there. They raced 3 wide to the finish of stage 2, and Hamlin took stage 1 and then took stage 2 as well. With stage 1 and stage 2 finally complete, we reached the end stage of this race. We restart with Austin Dillon and Denny Hamlin on the front row. Lots of cars pushing and shoving, and holy cow, Joey Logano was a very aggressive pusher. He was trying to probably get to the front to set himself up for a great end of the race. A lot of the drivers trying to make themselves be in the top 5. The top 4 at this time was Hamlin, Harvick, Logano, and Kyle Busch, and we're probably going to see those 4 names during the season a lot. I think it's going to be like another big 3 year, or like the big 2 that we had with Hamlin and Harvick last year, so there was no surprises for this top 4, and they stayed in this top 4 for like 20 laps. They raced single file racing until I think the last lap. We did have pit stops in between there. Again, the Toyotas and Fords pit separately of each other, but all together with their same manufacturers. And the Toyotas still pit by themselves. I don't understand why this cost Denny Hamlin, I believe, the race, and their pit stops were just kind of ugly. They tried to do the strategy of them all getting 2 tires and going out at the same time, but they were so sporadic when they came off of pit road that they weren't able to draft together, which, like I said, I think cost Denny Hamlin the race. So I don't think it was a smart move for Toyota. I hope next year they decide to team up with another manufacturer because there's just too few of them to be able to get back on the lead lap draft successfully. And it was a little bit of back and forth with all the drivers until the last lap. They were pretty much single file line, like I said, until the last lap. And at this point, this was either going to be the lamest finish in Daytona 500 history or the most exciting. There's a little bit of in between there, and I'll tell you here that there was a little bit of in between. I'll show you the footage. On the last lap, the car started to go rogue. There was a really exciting push to the finish. There was a lot of wreckage between teammates Keselowski and Logano. We had a caution at the white flag. There was a heavy hit, and when the caution waves on the white flag, it is the car that is in the lead. When that flag waves, that is the winner. So we have a massive wreck, luckily, and thank goodness all of the drivers climbed from their cars safely under their own power. And for that, we have to thank NASCAR and their safety advancements over the past 20-so years since that tragic crash from Dale Earnhardt Sr. Since then, NASCAR has been renovating to make these cars a lot safer, especially since the race last year with Ryan Newman. So thank goodness all those drivers came out of their cars under their own power. And after that, the race was called. Michael Mcdowell, who I said was statistically the best driver at Daytona, and won this race. This was his first career win at this track, and in general, this was his first career win in the NASCAR Cup Series. So I'll show you the finishing lineup here. Something really cool that was on social media, and a cool fact was Michael McDowell winning this year. It's been every 10 years that a new driver since 2001 has won the Daytona 500 as their first career win race. 2001, we had Michael Waltrip winning the race as his first career race. And then in 2011, we had Trevor Bayne win as his first career NASCAR Cup Series race. And this year, Michael McDowell. So we have to mark our calendars for 2031 to have a brand new winner win the race and their first race of the Cup Series. Other really cool finishes was Ryan Preece finished 6th as an open car, racing their way in to the Daytona 500, so that was extremely impressive. Spire Motorsports had both their cars in the top 10. Larson, with his first time with Team Hendrick, finished also in the top 10. Now, I feel so bad for Brad Keselowski. This was the only race, I believe, that he has not won yet, and he was so close, and I don't know if there's going to be bad blood between him and Joey Logano now, but they ended up not finishing the race in the top 10, and I was just, man, I was bummed for him. He was clearly and visibly upset, but I am glad that they are both safe and okay. Brad Keselowski had a really hard hit, as you saw, into the wall, so glad he is fine. And obviously, a big storyline is that Denny Hamlin did not defend his title as the Daytona 500 champion. He finished in the top 5, finishing in 5th place. So let's finish this podcast talking about drivers that impressed me and my rating of the race. Now, the drivers that impressed me were obviously Austin Cindric, who had a great run today, leading in the front of the field. He got caught in that wreck on the last lap, but he did amazingly well for his first official NASCAR Cup race. Larson also did, like I said, amazingly well, finishing in the top 10 for his first race back with a new team. He's not historically great at super speedways, so he did a fantastic job coming back and being in the top. And obviously Michael McDowell, I mean, he was going to win this race at some point in his career with the great statistics he has on his side, but he was in the mix pretty much the whole race, whether he was in the front or the back. We didn't talk about him a lot. They didn't talk about him a lot until the end when he was in the front, but my goodness, really impressed me. So with this race done, let's see if it rates above the yellow line. Now, I'm trying this out. Let's see if it works. I'm going to rate this race on a scale of 0 to 100%. 50%, if it lands on 50%, it's on the yellow line. If it's below the yellow line. And we want it to be above the yellow line to be a great race. So all things considered, the big one happening really, really early, taking out half the field, I think affected how the cars raced this time. We also had that rain delay that killed the momentum. Nothing that NASCAR could have done with that. The drivers can't drive in that rain. It's really bad for the cars. I'm also taking into consideration my viewing experience, meaning how Fox covered the breaks during this race. I hate to say this, but this was not my favorite Daytona 500 I've watched, and I was disappointed because I know this is the season of excitement. This race just was not to me, and that's not because there wasn't a lot of wrecks. I don't want the cars to wreck out. I just wanted there to be some movement. And with them taming down the horsepower for this race, obviously because of safety concerns, I have to give this race a rating of 65%. I'm not going below that because there was a lot of good hype before the race. The last lap was pretty incredible. There was just some issues I had. There were 2 issues with the early incident, and the coverage truly just knocked my rating down. Like I said, it wasn't the best Daytona 500 I've ever seen, but to see Michael McDowell be in the playoffs this year, yes, if he wins this race, he automatically makes his way into the playoffs, the round of 16. It's going to be interesting to see what this year has in store for him and for us as the viewers. And speaking of viewers, thank you so much for watching podcast number 6 of Above the Yellow Line, where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. I had so much fun watching the Daytona 500 and updating it and covering it. Next podcast, we'll do a pre-race show on the Daytona road course that is happening this coming weekend. We'll talk about the odds, and we'll also talk about who has the best chance of winning that race. Thank you so much for listening again. Until next time, I'll see ya.